You write about trust in this book, and obviously we started off the conversation by saying, look, you got to lead creatives a little differently. You can't just do a one-size-fits-all leadership, management philosophy, whatever you've read. And so if that's the case, I'm curious, because I know you're right about trust. Interesting that you use managing trust. You say earn the right, managing trust. That's the title of chapter 6. Yeah. I know you're specific there. You didn't say building trust.
That's right.
Why?
I think there's a misnomer or a misunderstanding we have about trust. We tend to think of trust kind of like a bank account. You know, if you put a little bit in, you can take a little bit out. And as long as you keep a positive trust balance, you're okay. That's not really the way that trust works, especially in a creative environment. Trust, I like to describe it more like a water balloon. You fill it up, you fill it up, you fill it up. But if you puncture it one time, you're going to lose it everywhere. Yes. And that's why, often teams seem to be firing on all cylinders, everything's going great, and then you get to the end of a big project right before a client presentation and everything blows up. You're like, what's going on? And somebody says like, well, you said you were going to bring bagels to the meeting 2 weeks ago and you didn't bring bagels. It's a silly example, but like it's probably not the bagels. But the reality is most leaders don't blow trust in the big ways. Like we're not overtly lying to our team. At least I trust that most people aren't overtly lying. Sure. It's the little things we do that lose trust. And when we forfeit trust in little ways, it tends to play out in big ways. So we forfeit trust in little ways, and then we get to the end of a project and we need somebody to deliver, and the trust simply isn't there for them to be able to make that creative leap. So we have to manage trust. We have to treat it like a precious commodity because it is. We have to earn the right every single day as a leader. And we do that really, frankly, we do it more in the little ways than we do in the big ways.
That's really good. I want to talk about chapter 10, Be the Muse. Yeah. I love that this is a challenge to leaders who may not be as creative as the people that, of course, they're leading and guiding and really depending on to be creative. How are they supposed to be the muse?
So as a leader, you're the chief dot connector. You have a point of view, a perspective that people on your team don't have, because you can see not just what's right in front of you, but you can see a month out, 2 months out, 6 months out. And so you have the unique ability to plant seeds with your team to get them ahead of the work, right? And to connect dots and to say, hey, I heard you talking about this, and somebody over here, your teammate was talking about this, and you guys should talk to one another because you're talking about similar things. And I think these two ideas are connected. Steve Jobs once famously quipped that creativity is just connecting things. And it is, right? Yeah. Really at the heart of it, creativity is just connecting dots. Well, as a leader, you have access to more dots than the people on your team. And so if you are strategic in how you listen, how you pay attention to what's going on, because again, you're probably in more meetings than most of your team members are. And so you get to see across the organization, you get to listen across the organization. And if you're intentional about connecting those dots, then you can create a fertile field for creative inspiration in your organization. And it's not only about that, but it's also about the kinds of things that you feed your team. So for example, if you're reading, if you're studying, if you're out there and you're, as one leader told me, over-indexing on things like books and podcasts and magazine articles, then you can winnow those down and you can begin funneling them to your team strategically. Like, hey, I know we have this big project coming up in a couple of months, and so I'm going to start funneling things to you that I think are going to begin sort of tilling the soil, for you, so that you can begin thinking about these things that are coming up. You don't need ideas yet, but I'm just going to start planting some seeds here for you because I know that's going to bear fruit here in a couple of months. So, again, it's really more about your perspective as a leader, the fact that you see more than your team does. And so you can strategically plant seeds, you can strategically connect dots, and you can sort of keep them in this kind of place of fertility creatively.
Yeah, I like the strategically planting seeds. I love what you're talking about there. This is something that I believe. I'm curious to know what you think and how it should be manifested. But I believe that even small business leaders, who may not have a huge team, okay, because we have a lot of small business owners and operators that are listening in here. It could even be outside relationships, people that you respect that are highly creative, but people on your team. But no matter how big the organization is, Todd, I really believe, and I just started thinking about this when you mentioned this idea of course, the chapter being the muse. But it seems to me that it would be better off if leaders got the most creative people around them, whether, again, they work for them or not, and they got involved with these people early and often on casting vision, new vision, updating vision, because there's something special about a creative mind when you're not asking them to just make this idea better or make it look good or sound good, but help me actually create a better version of the vision.
Right. Absolutely, no question. Well, and that's important for the creative people too, that you surround yourself with, because people, creative people need to understand the through line. They need to understand the why behind the what. And this is one of the big things that contributes to dissonance in organizations, a disconnect between the why and the what. And highly creative people also tend to be highly perceptive people, highly intuitive people. And when they don't see a connection between what they're doing and the core why of the organization, or at least some kind of why, right? When they feel like they're just producing work,
So
but there's no through line, it can be very maddening. It can be very frustrating. You're not going to get the best work out of them. So by staying involved with them, casting vision, getting them involved in the process of helping shape and develop that vision, you're not only sort of getting them aligned with the team, and you're not only getting the best vision for the team, but you're also ensuring that they're going to be rooted in the work that you're doing, and they're going to be bringing their best effort, because they're going to make that connection between the why and the what, instead of spending their precious creative cycles trying to reconcile. Now, why am I doing this again? Why does this matter?
That's so true.
And it seems so obvious, and yet we don't do it. We assume that as a leader, we assume everybody else gets it the same way we do.
That's right.
And we don't realize we have to keep going back. We have to keep connecting dots. We have to keep going back and making sure that people understand that they're rooted in the through line of the organization, the productive passion of the organization.
I absolutely love that. I see a lack of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't get the best creatives involved after you've already crystallized the vision.
Right.
Get them involved early. That leads me to something that I want to talk about with you, very, very practical, and this is the brainstorming meetings, or just let's not box ourselves into just that idea, because I think that conjures up different things for different people.
Right.
I love brainstorming meetings, only under a certain set of rules. You know what I mean?
Right,
Where it's like, it's a free-for-all, it's a yes-and process. Kelly Leonard, I've had him on, from Second City here on the show, and we talked about that. But I want to talk about what works, what doesn't work from your research, what you write about in the book, because and then just the importance of getting this process started. But you kind of espouse for a little bit of a decentralized process.
Right.
Explain that.
Yeah, so I think one of the mistakes that we make as leaders, especially in this idea generation brainstorming process, is we basically treat everybody the same, right? So it typically goes something like this. This probably sounds familiar to people listening, right? So it's like we get everybody in the room together, the leader stands up, writes some project or problem on the board, turns around and says, all right, who has ideas? And then there's the first maybe 5 seconds of awkwardness, and then the hyper-caffeinated person in the corner all of a sudden starts throwing out, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we did that? And then the hyper-caffeinated person in the other corner starts shouting, what if we do this? What if we do this? And so then you end up with like 4 or 5 people basically triangulating among one another, and you've got 50 ideas on the board in the first 20 minutes, and then it's like, okay, well, which of these do we like best? Meanwhile, there are probably 6 or 7 people in the room who haven't even said a word yet.
And probably are shutting down due to all the mess on the board.
Absolutely.
They're freaking out.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one leader called this dynamic fast twitch and slow twitch people. He said, you have a lot of people who are wired for this brainstorming thing. They love this brainstorming thing, this traditional method where it's like, let's just get in the room, let's throw out ideas. And maybe like 1 out of 50 is going to be a valuable idea, but we're going to get a lot of them on the board. And then you have some people who are slow twitch people who probably aren't going to contribute in that meeting, and maybe they'll sit there and they'll kind of stare at it and their wheels are turning, and then 4 hours later, or maybe 12 hours later, or 18 hours later, they're going to have some brilliant insight. But by that point, it's too late, because you've already settled on your decision and you've moved on. So when you conduct brainstorming sessions in the traditional way, you're basically alienating all of those slow twitch people. So what he advised me to do was to instead give everybody the problem ahead of time, define it for people, let them know, hey, on Thursday at this time, we're going to talk about this specific problem. I want you to come to the meeting with a couple of ideas, the ideas that you think are best. So, of course, the fast twitch people, immediately, they sit down and they start mapping out like their 50 answers, and they winnow it down to the 2. The slow twitch people start working on the problem, maybe a day later, maybe a day and a half, maybe 5 minutes before they walk into the meeting, they have a hunch, an insight, they bring it in. But it puts everybody on equal footing. So then when you go around the table and you say, okay, everybody bring your best couple of ideas. Let's get them on the board. Everybody's on equal footing. The fast twitch people, the slow twitch people, you're getting the best of both groups.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can have a meaningful conversation. Then you can talk about what you like, what you don't like, what's working, what's not working. But basically, you're giving people an opportunity to think about the problem in advance instead of expecting everyone to just generate ideas
Right.
on demand.